Homelessness is worsening over time.
If you don't have a home, you really can't focus on other parts of your life.
Our children are our future because we are the present.
You're one really bad day away from being homeless.
Folks that you walk past on the street, they're somebody's family member.
Housing, education, people. Those are game changers. We have the money, the intellect, the passion. We can do this.
Hi, my name is Hannon, and I'm the host of The Bells I Hear, an audio and video podcast that aims to raise awareness about the homelessness crisis in New York City and the complexity surrounding the issue. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, we have Kevin Fagan joining us. Kevin is an award-winning journalist and author that has covered the issue of homelessness for over 40 years. His book, The Lost and the Found, uncovers the stories of two unhoused people, their struggles with addiction, and their fight to rise above their situation. It's so great to have you on here today, Kevin.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Could you tell us a bit about the moment or an experience that sort of sparked your passion for this work?
I guess when I was 16 years old, I got thrown out of the house and had to sleep in a field for a little bit and then put myself through college. Had to live in my car at times. I lived in an unfinished garage. It was not your typical entry into college life. We were poor for a lot of my childhood, so I had an interest in the subject from the beginning. And I had always wanted to be a journalist since I was a young kid in high school. So when I started writing as a reporter and then as an editor throughout my career, my first stories were about poverty, even in college. That was a long time ago. My first ever story that I wrote was 1978. So when homelessness exploded in the 80s, I was there and I had a pen and I covered it. As it grew, it was a horror that I just never lost interest in documenting. The crisis as we know it began, of course, under Reaganomics in the 80s, and it escalated until all these years later, we still haven't figured out as a country how to successfully deal with poverty and homelessness, because the two are inextricably interlinked. The first story I did was staying out all night in downtown San Jose, where I was going to college, and I was at a Jack in the Box, which was the epicenter of nightlife for the street hookers, the addicts and dealers. It was a scene, and I had been sleeping around there in my car, actually, and the cops would come sweep me. You know, back then, you weren't really allowed to sleep in your car anywhere. It's a little more permissive than it was in the 70s. And throughout the night, a crazy scene. And as a young man, as a kid, it really struck me that these are people in crisis, in despair, and they need attention. That same story gets used still at the university as a model on how to cover poverty.
Yeah.
At the paper. It's now, I guess, a historical document because it's so old. But I've covered thousands of stories since then. I mean, I counted up my time at the 32 years at the Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle. I wrote 5,300 stories. And it was a lot on crime, general interest. I didn't just do homelessness. I was a pretty vigorous crime and disaster reporter too, but homelessness was always closest to my heart.
So, you covered a lot of different subjects when you worked at the Chronicle. What sort of led you to focus on reporting and writing about homelessness, within your own writing?
Well, that included it as a major emphasis the whole time. But in 2003, we got a new editor at the Chronicle named Robert Rosenthal, known as Rosie. He'd come from Philadelphia, and he was walking around San Francisco with his family and saw a guy pick up a pigeon, crack its neck, and stuff it up under his jacket like he was going to eat it later. And he said, okay, this is too much, because he described the street scene as Fellini-ish. And at the time, in 2003, there were more homeless people in the nightly homeless night count than there are today. Even after all these efforts we've had, it's always hovered right around the same with some dips here and there. And so he sent a couple of reporters, a couple of our journalists out into the street That was me, and a guy named Brant Ward, who's a great photographer, and we were kind of the street grit guys at the time, and the instruction was figure out why there's so many homeless people out there and take as long as you want, which is a reporter's dream. So Brant and I get out on the street, and first thing we said was, we don't want to just figure out why they're here. We want to figure out how people can be helped. We want to look at the best practices, what works. And we don't want to take forever. I mean, some people like to stretch an assignment for a year, maybe 2. Yeah. Depends on where you're at. I mean, we did this thing in 6 months. We stayed outside a lot, went home a lot. We didn't pretend we were homeless, but we slept all over the city to get a feel of the nightlife, and talking to every crowd we could find, from Golden Gate Park to the waterfront, downtown, and the Tenderloin, which is one of the poorest neighborhoods, well, probably the poorest. There are a couple that are always in contention. The one right downtown that people point to as the epicenter of homelessness and poverty in San Francisco. Spent a lot of time there, the Mission District. And after 6 months, we wrote a 5-day series that was called Shame of the City. And by the end of those 5 days, it was kind of a national phenomenon. Got nominated for a Pulitzer, came close to winning, but close, and a dime will get you a dime. But President Bush and his homeless czar liked the series because what we attempted to do was show the severity of the issue, and then how we got here, and then how to fix it. The first day was a desperate group of homeless people that we profiled. The second day was a family living in a van. Third day was me and Brant staying in the worst and biggest shelter in the city. Fourth day was an examination of how we got here. And fifth day was how to get out of it, based on best practice.
While you guys were kind of investigating, what was like the most shocking thing that you discovered, or something that you had learned that you just didn't know before?
Nothing shocked us, except for what really made an impression on us was the people who died. I had certainly been around plenty of people who died. I've been shot at. I've watched people burn to death. As an intensive reporter over the years, I see a lot of stuff, but getting to know chronically homeless people in the street and becoming close to them, befriending them actually, it's hard when people that you know really well, that you consider friends or people that you're close to as a reporter, when they die, it hurt. And over the years, I've written more obituaries than I can count. People in my book die. The story we did on the first day was about a place called Homeless Island, which is where I met Rita, one of the main characters in my book. The book's about 2 people I helped pull off the streets, Rita Grant and Tyson Filzer. And Rita was living on Homeless Island, and her boyfriend was a guy named Tommy Rettig. And the lead of my first story in that series said something like, the day Tommy rotted to death was a day like any other on the homeless island, on the traffic island. The thing is, he got flesh-eating disease from an abscess that he got from shooting up with dirty needles, and the abscess got out of control. It literally ate him alive and rotted his flesh, and he died. And the islanders were wondering where Tommy had gone, so Rita and a few others said, hey, why don't you guys go find him? So we did. We looked around and found him at the morgue, and he was a mess. It was tough seeing him. He had essentially dissolved. A lot of body had just rotted away. We went back and told the islanders, and everyone freaked out. It was a scene. So that made an impression. It hurt our heart to see these people, and to be in such proximity for so long and so intensely. I guess that's what really struck me. It filled me with even more passion to write accurately and extensively about this issue. But shocked, maybe I'm just, I'm an old warhorse, as they say in the business. Not a whole hell of a lot shocks me.
You've seen it all.
Pretty much.
I'm sure, the pain of, especially if you're forming this like deep bond, this connection with the individuals, I'm sure it, like that part of it, like seeing them pass is never going to get easier. So
No. And as you get older, hell, people die all around you. I've watched 7 executions where people died in front of me. One with gas as he convulsed his way to death, and the others with injections that had issues. I've watched people, like I said, you see it a lot. If you want to do that kind of reporting, and not everyone does, but I always liked the intensive stuff. So I became not so much used to it, but used to being able to handle it.
Oh. So, you mentioned the two people that you follow within your book, The Lost and the Found, and they sort of reflect two different outcomes. How important was it to highlight both of their journeys and, what eventually happened to them?
I thought it was very important. I had originally proposed years before that I write a book about Homeless Island itself, because it had a wildly eclectic group of people with Rita. You had Rita and her boyfriend Tommy. Rita had come from Florida, had been a really promising, beautiful girl in the 60s back in Florida, surfer girl, bound for the Olympics as a gymnast, and things all fell apart through the course of her life, and she wound up homeless. There was a little person named Little Bit, who was a street prostitute who people hired because they thought she was a kid. And then there was a trans black woman who had been horribly abused as a kid in Colorado and wound up out here in San Francisco. And they all washed up on homeless. I thought that was an interesting story in itself. No one bit. And then in 2019, I met Tyson Filser, who was just sitting on a piece of cardboard while I was doing a story about a proposed homeless shelter. And what made both those people spring up to me as characters for my book was their families contacted. And what happened with Rita back in 2004, just after the series had run, is her sister contacted me and said, I'm coming out to get my sister Rita. I'm taking her back to Florida. We're going to see if we can stabilize her. Thanks for writing the story. We gave it a year, and I went back to Florida, and it had worked. Rita had rehabbed beautifully, had become the person she was meant to be. And went on to be a health nutritionist, a licensed massage therapist, and we, Christmas cards, calls, we were friends for the next, for decades. And then Tyson comes along, and his brother calls me from Ohio after the story ran that had Tyson in it. And he said, I haven't seen my brother in 7 years. Help me find him. I'm flying out there. I'm doing a GoFundMe. We'll get him into rehab if we can find him. So he did. We walked, I helped find him. And I helped with the intervention in a hotel room Barron had rented. Barron had brought an interventionist. He and Vicky, the interventionist, that was their job. I was there as a reporter, but I'm a human before I'm a reporter. So my message to Tyson was, this is your chance at life. Take this chance. And he was ready. And so I thought, this is two people who really represent something, the love of the family, for one, and the efficiency or inefficiency of our system as a society to help people get over homelessness. And that with them, they were chronically homeless, which often involves drug addiction or mental illness. With Tyson, he was addicted. Rita was addicted. Tyson had an undiagnosed mental condition. In the book, I don't want to give away the whole ending, but it doesn't end so well for Tyson after a really wonderful period. And it ends very well for Rita. So I thought, that's yin yang. That's light dark. I can use that as a story. And I really wanted to communicate. After, more than 45 years as a journalist, I think I learned a few things about what works and what doesn't. And I want to share that. I mean, we get into journalism to illuminate, to shine a light, to discover. And the book is and was a great vehicle for putting down my thoughts. They let me write it first person, which was fun. It was easy to write. I mean, it's like writing a journal almost. You just keep typing. So it was a pleasure to do. And it was a pleasure to be able to hook in with these folks, because their families were just lovely. Rita's sister, Pam, wonderful person. And then the whole family wound up being terrific too. She reconnected with everyone. Tyson's brother, Barron, like most of the families involved in this book, a hero to me, going the extra yard. And his father, I did, getting to know these people even deeper than I did when I wrote stories for the newspaper about these various sagas, because I did before I did the book. And in the book, I got to take it much further into detail, plus bring about some conclusions to both their journeys. They were remarkable people, and I wanted to communicate that because everyone has a story to tell. Everyone was somebody's baby with promise, and I wanted people to understand that these aren't just cardboard cutouts on the street that you pass by and you either deride them or throw them $1 or feel bad for them. They're real people.
Yeah, they are. And, you mentioned that their stories were sort of like yin and yang within the Lost and Found. What did you hope readers would take away from like their contrasting experiences?
The fact that it is not easy helping a chronically homeless person off the street. There was a feeling in the 80s when homelessness first began that these new waves of poor people showing up in the street with sleeping bags and sleeping in parks and sidewalks. Well, let's give them a sandwich and a shelter cot, and then they'll pull themselves up by their bootstraps because that's the American way.
Yeah.
And what we as a society did not realize for many years is that people need, when they're that far gone into the street and they stay there for a while, they're not going to pull themselves up generally. They need a lot of help to get over the trauma and in so many cases addiction or mental illness. And there's shame, there's anger, just a whole range of things that help keep you down in the street, and you need help pulling up.
Yeah.
What I found was supportive housing, the housing people, and then surrounding them with counseling services. That is a good fix, a good way to address it. And street counseling, engaging people in the street over and over until you convince them to come inside. The best solution is prevention.
Yeah.
If we didn't have the poverty that we do,
It leads into a vicious cycle. In the book, you mentioned that you can only help those on the streets that want to be helped. But right now, you sort of just mentioned that, like, one of the ways in which you can help unhoused people is by extending that help, obviously. But I guess, how is that for you when you're trying to extend that help towards people, but they aren't as receptive? How do you approach that or balance that?
you mean as a reporter or as a writer?
I would say so. And like just your desire to help unhoused people get back on their feet.
Yeah, as a writer, I didn't take people home. I didn't give them money. I mean, every once in a while I'd give $1 or so if I knew damn well it was going to something to eat, or I'd buy people food. My approach is, let me tell your story. Let me help people understand the despair and the trauma of being in the street. Because no homeless person I ever really got to know wanted to be homeless. I don't think anyone wants to be homeless unless they've got a delusion going on in their heads of some way or another. Everyone wants to get off the street. They don't want to sleep face down in the dirt. It's just not a thing. But you have to dig through the self-defense mechanisms that people install in themselves to be able to get by day by day. They don't automatically trust someone like me coming along with a pen and a paper, or a street counselor come along with a power bar saying, hey, I got a shelter bed for you.
Yeah.
No, I know what I'm doing, how to stay alive out here. Leave me alone. So my message is, I will hear you. I will listen to you. And most people are really good at telling when you're slaying bullshit. They can tell if you're sincere. And you have to be sincere. If you're going to do homeless stories or interact with homeless people, you actually have to care. Otherwise, it's going to come through and you're not going to get anywhere.
How do you go about building that trust with individuals?
Well, you talk to them like people. I shoot the shit. How you doing today? How's business? If they got a panhandling sign, because that's their business. Looks like you got a couple of new shoes. Where'd you get them? How are things going for you out here? And then sometimes they've got an illness they want to talk about. Sometimes, it's tough out here. Tell me more. Just talk to them like a human being. I mean, I'm a chatty guy. So when I'm in a grocery line, if it's a long one and someone wants to chat, I'm all ears. I'm all mouth. Let's talk. So chat them up. Treat them like people. Because so often when you're chronically homeless, you don't get treated like people.
Right.
And the chronically homeless, I got to say, it's only about 20 to 30% of usual homeless population. The rest, the vast majority, are coming through shelters or couch surfing or, in an institution of some kind. And they generally self-resolved. It's episodic. And they come in and they come out of homelessness. They hit a bad patch. They got fired. Their truck broke down. They can't work. Domestic violence. They're fleeing until they find something. But the chronically homeless are the ones who are the most desperate, the most traumatized. And so that's where Brant and I, and then I, as on my own, after Brant retired some years ago, that's what we and I have always focused most on, because they're in the most need.
Yeah. When you're sort of, hearing their stories out and are putting a pen to paper, how do you sort of go about humanizing and house people in your writing?
That's a good question. It's how do you go? It's reflexive at this point. Write about them as people, not just poor things who are in the street, or certainly some reporters over the years like to just portray homeless people as problems and eyesores and offenses. Nobody really wants someone sleeping on their doorstep and, going to the bathroom or puking on the step. Sometimes you have to report about that. But when I get to even problematic people, you try to get to know them. And it can be difficult when someone is mentally ill or having a drug episode, where they're high on meth. I got slashed with a knife. Guy once was high on meth. You have to try to talk to people when they're approachable. But even when they're not, you want to find out what's going on here. But portray people as people, three-dimensional, not just the surface. And that takes a little extra doing. The homelessness it's actually a pretty time-intensive, wearing endeavor. Spending all day out in the street, all night. I mean, you may be sleeping a lot of the night, but you're not for a lot of the night too. You keep an eye out to make sure your head doesn't get stove in. And then during the day, it's a lot of wandering around, talking to people who don't want to talk. You go to the next group, someone wants to talk. Maybe someone gets mad. You hit someone who can talk for an hour, then you move on to the next thing. It kind of gives you a feel, if you're going to report that intensively, it gets you a feel for what it's like being homeless. It can be pretty damn dull being homeless. There's a lot of sitting around doing nothing, and often a hopelessness. You feel, God, is my life ever going to get any better? And when you're wandering around talking to folks, it rubs off on you. Like when because I did time, when I was younger, I'd be a police reporter. I had several stints that, which led to extensive crime writing along with my homeless writing and the disaster. And after a while, after about a year on the police beat, you start thinking everyone's, looking a little sketchy. The cops only go deal. You're only called to handle things that are wrong. It's a job to keep your equilibrium, to stay centered and see the world with context.
So like what sort of impact does storytelling have on people, and like understanding there's sort of like this perception, right, that people have of homeless people where it's like, oh, they're dangerous and they're a threat. And so I guess what impact do you think storytelling has on like sort of shifting that narrative?
It packages an issue, a problem, a solution, a situation in a way that people can relate. Even in a conversation, you're storytelling. You want to take people on a journey, even if it's a 2-minute conversation, it's got a journey. It has a beginning and it takes you to a conclusion.
Right.
People want to attach and relate to characters and situations so they can understand what you're saying. In writing stories and, well, in the book, I call it kind of an approach where you got to give them the broccoli with the cake and the regular meal. Telling the story of Tyson and Rita was a human narrative I think a lot of people could relate to. Because
Right.
Rita went to high school just like me. Gee, she did gymnastics and she was really good at it. I knew people like that. You get it so that people can get into the story and what you're trying to convey. And then along the way, you toss in the broccoli. 20 to 30% of the homeless population is chronic. Rehab, you got to go to rehab usually around 6 times till it finally sticks. Stuff like that you drop in. So you're packaging in a way that people don't just read the first 3 pages and then put it down because it gets dull.
Yeah.
Too preachy, too academic, too facile.
Helping people see themselves.
Yeah, because everyone likes to see themselves. They like to talk about themselves. They like to hear about other people. It's a mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're dead right. You want to see yourself in the narratives.
Yeah. It's really important. So in your book, you also emphasize this idea of like found family as a form of survival. In NYC, a lot of like youth are disconnected from their families. I guess, could you explain what a found family is and like the importance of it?
Oh, very important. Just one quick example is 40% of the youth, homeless youth, are LGBTQ. Tossed out by their families, ostracized in one way or another, lost. You got to go find your own people who are in the same kind of situation as you, the same demographics. It's like in life. We generally tend to hang out with people like ourselves to some extent, who think the same way, who have the same experiences, the same kind of background. And then you expand beyond that. But when you're in the street, you want to be around other people who can relate to your situation. You watch each other's backs. You know where to get the stuff you need is. You can ask, Joe or Joni sitting next to you on the sidewalk, where'd you get that food? Where'd you get that dope? Gee, you got a good blanket. Where can I get another one of those? It's, everyone needs emotional connection. Everyone needs love, friendship, connection. And that's what you create for yourself in the street and in the housed world as well. A lot of us have families. I'm lucky enough to have a family. I know people who don't. They create their own collections, their own people to lean on. It's like a song, Lean On Me.
Yeah.
You got to have someone to lean on.
Someone that sees you, that's rooting for you. Doesn't have to be blood related. It still matters. It still counts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you sort of describe the impact that, being unhoused can have on one's mental health? I know that you've worked with people that are dealing with addiction, and being unhoused can definitely impact your mental health. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. If you weren't mentally traumatized before you hit the street, you're going to be after a year. It's tough. It's a hard life. You get rejection. People shame you. You get hungry. And if you weren't doing drugs before you went into the street, chances are, a lot of folks are going to wind up doing some kind of drugs after you've been on the street a long time because it's tough to cope. And drugs are so amazingly available. And then you got that to deal with. It's a hard way of living it. It's like being super poor. I mean, when I was living in a garage right after I left home, I had to build my own furniture out of scrap wood. I made a bicycle out of stuff I found in the trash. As a father, my kid did not have to build her bike out of trash. She's had an much easier life, and I'm super happy for that and proud of that. But when you have to fight and dig for every detail of your life, it wears on you. It traumatizes you. It screws with your head. It just does. And makes it really hard to cope.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. And I'm sure you've witnessed firsthand how trauma, addiction, and mental health intersect. And, NYC's DHS shelters operate in crisis mode often. I guess what sort of models of trauma-informed care or harm reduction do you think that New York City could borrow?
Well, the Pathways to Housing was a pretty good program I looked into years ago in New York, where it was scattered site supportive housing for severely mentally ill, chronically homeless people. And it was kind of expensive, as some programs go, but it's a model of supportive housing which still applies today. Housing people and then having, and in that case with scattered site, meaning it wasn't all in one place, you'd have counselors regularly visit the people that had been placed into housing. And then you hook them into programs to help them stabilize with their mental illness, get off whatever drugs they may have been on, get into a job program. Supportive housing is always, no matter what city it is, New York, Denver, LA, seen them all. It's always about the caseworkers, the support that's within that housing. Just give someone a place to live is the most important first step is to have a roof over your head. Then you can engage with the programs that help you. If you don't have the programs and the counseling and the attention and the casework, it has a very good possibility of failing or becoming problematic.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, permanent supportive housing is like the first step, but like what other areas can you help people out with to make sure, they don't lose that housing? Yeah.
Yeah. And the trouble is that we know how to do this in all our big cities. We just don't have it up to scale because it costs money.
Right.
It would be cheaper if we prevented this stuff to begin with. And it is cheaper than leaving a chronically homeless person on the street. Someone living chronic on the street will cost about 85, 90 grand a year in police calls, ambulance visits, emergency room stays, cleanups, sweep costs. I mean, all that stacks up. You put someone in supportive housing, it can cost anywhere from, what state you're in, $15,000 to $45,000 a year. It's cheaper.
It's way less.
And it's more compassionate. It's
also cheaper than shelters as well.
Those will be about 60 grand a year.
Yeah.
God, in New York City, I mean, you're example A of how to not do shelters well, because you don't move people on to the next step, and they become de facto housing projects. They're not meant to be what they're serving as.
It's supposed to be temporary.
Yeah.
So you've sort of mentioned throughout that you believe in like preventative strategies. I guess, what do you sort of envision our communities doing to prevent people from becoming, unhoused even more?
Well, on a macro level, I did work in other countries. And so I lived in other countries under their systems. And no other westernized country has the problem with poverty, homelessness that we have. England has a population of between 58 and 60 million people. Their homeless population is about the same as San Francisco. Other countries have national health, they have living wage laws, they have affordable housing, and they have housing help if you can't afford your housing. We don't have that to the scale that we should. And that alone would go a long ways toward fixing our problems. Beyond that, preventing homelessness, there are some great programs in a lot of major cities where people, rather than just helping those who are already homeless, they also help those who are in danger of becoming homeless. And it generally costs about $7 grand to help someone prevent someone from becoming homeless. A lot of folks, when you're just hanging on, your car breaks down and you can't get to work anymore. You get sick. Your kid gets sick. You lose a job. Then you get behind on the rent while you're waiting to get the next job. It's about $7,000 to fix that situation. That's what it averages out to. San Jose has found that. San Francisco finds that. Other cities have the same situation. If you pay attention and you make yourself available as a government agency so that people know they can go for help if they're in that kind of situation, it's wonderful prevention. And that's what we need more of. Actually making wages big enough that you can live on and housing affordable enough so you can live in.
Right.
The Band-Aids. We need the Band-Aids like that.
Yeah. And it's like large, maybe upfront costs, but in the long run, it will prevent so much more people from losing their homes or finding themselves in this circumstance. So it's worth
That's
it.
the thing. And the conservatives and liberals can come meet in the middle on this one. You save money. It's compassionate.
Yeah.
What's the lose in there? It's a win-win.
Yeah, it should be something that we should agree on.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any disagreement. You spotlight deeply personal story. Within New York City, there are over 30,000 people in shelters and 100,000 youth experiencing homelessness. How do you think we can tell their story in a way that still feels human and urgent, even when the number kind of feels so large?
It's just keep telling the stories. I mean, I've got this book on my shelf. Andrea Elliott, I met her some years ago for the New York Times, wrote Invisible Child about a kid named Asani who was in the shelter system in New York with her family. That story was, God, years ago. You could write that same story today. But we have to keep refreshing it because each new generation that comes along, each new group that comes along, they don't know what you wrote before. Not everyone has my book on their shelf. You got to keep the word out there, humanizing the problem and quoting and spotlighting people who are coming up with good solutions to it. And spotlighting the things that don't work in the system and then pointing out what could work in those things that don't work. It's the same thing. It's rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
The problem is rinse and repeat, and the reporting is rinse and repeat, but it's necessary.
Yeah. Refreshing people's minds, but also sharing people's stories. Because when you bunch it up, it's hard to sort of like process. But then when you single a story out and help people connect, I think that's what makes probably a big difference. So, in your opinion, are there any sort of policy changes that you feel are needed to effectively help people in these situations?
Affordable housing that creates supportive housing with services, that creates varying types of supportive housing. For the longest time, sober housing was considered too intensive. Housing first is the model that's been followed for decades, where you house people before they're free of their drugs, stabilized on mental illness, and that can work for a lot of people. You also need another approach where people can be housed in situations where they're not around other people who are using or who haven't stabilized on mental illness. You need all of the above, as they say. It's expensive doing these things, but it's more expensive not to, in both economically and psychically. I mean, I keep going back to the word traumatizing. You could just say it's a bummer for all of us to be in a world, in a country where we have this level of despair and poverty around us. And it's a bummer for the people who are in that despair and poverty to be in it. It's just not the way we're supposed to be living.
Yeah. And so, obviously everyone should care because no one should really be unhoused. There's enough housing. This is something that we should obviously address. But could you touch on maybe some of the consequences that homelessness is having and will continue to have on our society and in our communities?
It brings us down as a society. It's you judge a society, as I say in the book, and so many people have said, by how it treats its most vulnerable. We are not treating our most vulnerable well. It's kids growing up knowing that there are people eating out of trash cans and sleeping in tents on a sidewalk and shooting up and having fentanyl fold in front of them while they walk to school. And then the people experiencing that, having fentanyl folds in the street and eating out of trash cans or handouts. It hampers you as a society from moving forward in the best way that you can. We should be happy. The happiness index is something that exists in the world. We're not on the happiness index. gets in the way of moving forward. That's generally speaking, but it's just true.
Yeah.
Other countries that don't have this can pay more attention to, art programs, doing better with the education. If you're not having to spend money on rescuing people from despair in the streets, you can put more money into education, to programs, to your parks, to things that are enhancing everyone's lives, that are, back to that word, happy. We're a happier place when we don't have this. It's simple. It's a true thing for human beings.
Right. We wouldn't be leaving anyone behind, hypothetically, if we address the problem. We can all
Yeah,
move
what do you
forward.
think? Why do we need, what's the macro for why we need to eliminate homelessness in our society?
I think we're abandoning people in a way, like people that just need help. I think that it could, kind of like you said, allow us to focus on addressing other issues. There is a lot going on in the country and in the world, but also housing is a right, like a basic human right. Everyone should have a safe, secure place to sleep. And I think that a lot of things that are out of people's control has led them to the situation. And it's a little bit unfair, right? And I don't think it should be based on fairness or like luck or, your circumstance. Everyone should just have it. And I just think it would just allow us to, kind of like you said, just move forward and just focus on other things to improve upon within our world.
And those people who are in despair, they could instead be contributing to moving forward in our society, voting, being part of the
And just not
decision
suffering.
making. Yeah, it's like your environment. If you live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of shooting and theft and violence, it tamps you down. When you live in a quieter neighborhood, you feel easier. Same thing with homelessness and poverty.
You're not afraid. You're not distracted.
Yeah.
It definitely, is very positive. To sort of lead on this positive note, I guess, how do you think that we as community members can further bring awareness to the crisis or just do our part in addressing it?
Well, vote for people who you feel have the right emphasis toward addressing the problem. Volunteer. I know a lot of people who volunteer in soup kitchens or community groups. That's a good thing. Be involved. On a very personal level, when you're walking around homeless people, stop and talk. Let someone have a conversation with you so that they are being seen, they're being heard as a person. And just, shoot the ball. How's your day going?
That's simple.
Yeah, let them be seen, let them feel it. We're all ripples on the rock. We want to wear it down and help people wear down their troubles so that they can be open to taking real help at some point. Just be
Right.
a good human.
Yeah. I think Rita's story definitely stands out to me because I think oftentimes people can feel a little bit hopeless and sort of like, oh, like there's no point, like it's crumbling. But the very fact that you went out, extended help, brought her family, and she was able to sort of turn her life around is, I don't know, sort of just reason enough to step in and help, because even just one life helped, matters, make the big difference. And
Yeah,
its impact.
That's what I loved being able to convey, because her family was really wonderful. And it took her being able to accept that help and follow it for everything to succeed. And it was remarkable. A lot of families are done with you when you sink that far down. These folks were open to helping her again. Sure, there's always some level of anger and suspicion in a family once things have gone so wrong. These guys, one by one, opened up, and it was a very loving rejuvenation. I loved portraying that. And I loved hearing her, having conversations with her over the years as she became who she was meant to be, she still had some of that street in her. We could talk street.
Yeah.
And one thing I would always say to her is, Rita, if she'd ask me how the other homeless islanders are doing, and one by one, virtually all of them died. I think there are a couple that may be alive, but I lost track. And they mostly died horribly. And I said, Rita, for God's sakes, don't come back here to visit. It would be tempting to get sucked back one way or another into that life.
Right.
You got a good thing going. And she understood that. And she loved her good life. It was just a pleasure. And Tyson, his family was just so loving and open and supportive. And when he came through the fog of being on the street and became himself again, it was joyful. You know, how the book ends. It's tough, but his family still loved him and cared all the way through the end of the book.
Yeah, it was definitely important to highlight both of their stories.
I've had reactions from their friends who are in the book, who read the book later, and everyone's got some goodness in them. And both these people had a lot of friends who saw the goodness in them. It was just really touching. I think it's better to look on the positive side of life if you can. Get through the shit, look for the good. And these people both had a lot of good.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's been so wonderful having you on. Yeah, thank you for all the incredible work that you're doing. It's making a difference. So thank you.
I hope so. And thank you for listening. Thank you for having me here. It's been a lovely talking to you, Hannah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, same here. All right, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. The episode was hosted by me, Hannah Nabraja, produced by Baron Mello. The audio and video editing was done by Ilona Tuominen, and the music is courtesy of Diego Urquela. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to The Bells I Hear and follow us on social media at The Bells I Hear to find more content and to spread the word. Thanks again. Till next time.